Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about a huge pattern change that'll be impacting the United States this week, limiting the severe weather, increasing the temperatures, bringing some heat waves, along with the potential for a tropical system to develop later this week. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the eastern half of the United States. That is where a low pressure system continues to unravel across the northeast and as well as along the east coast. We are seeing some showers and storms out there this afternoon. We've seen a little bit of severe weather as well, but overall the threat of severe weather is very low today. You'll notice over the central United States there is a huge high pressure system dominating areas like the Midwest and along the Great Plains. We have hardly any cloud cover out there on the infrared imagery this afternoon. That is all due to that high pressure system, which is going to make a lot of areas much warmer and as well as a lot drier for this upcoming week. And then believe it or not, this is all coming from a jet stream pattern that is very stagnant. This is something that we usually do not see in May. Usually the jet stream that we're seeing right now, we see more towards June or July. This is a very unusual May that we've had so far due to this jet stream. And you'll notice over the next several days, there is really no clearly defined jet stream. Where the jet stream actually is way back up into here in the northern United States. If not, it's up into Canada. And it's a very weak jet stream. You'll notice just very light blue colors. That's going to be indicating a very weak jet stream overall. However, there's actually going to be a negatively tilted trough as we head into Sunday into Monday. That's actually going to create a threat for severe weather back up into areas that hardly see severe weather during this time of the year. And that's back up in Montana, Idaho, and even back over into Washington. So very surprising stuff there. And then once we go into later this week, it just continues to stay very stagnant. A very strong ridge will be in place across the central United States, and this will keep the severe weather threat across a large chunk of the country very low to zero. So great news there if you don't want to see any more severe storms. Obviously, for those that storm chase, this is going to be something that's going to be impacting that because we'll not really be seeing many storms over this week. But once we get closer to the weekend and into next week, that is when things could get a bit more interesting. That's when we might see some more dicey setups with the threat for severe weather returning. But for right now, for this entire week, we're really not looking at anything too scary. However, some things could get interesting, especially down in the southeast United States. And even the Midwest could see some interesting storms later this week, and I'll talk about more on that in just a moment. But first, beginning with the humidity across the United States, which is quite interesting. We have a lot more humidity along the Gulf Coast over this weekend. Once we go into next week, you'll notice the dew points start to creep up just a little bit across anywhere from the Midwest back through the Great Plains. A lot of this, though, will not be enough for any sort of significant storm activity when we're talking about like large hail and damaging winds. Once we go closer to a Wednesday and a Thursday, you'll notice a very large high pressure system back up into Canada, which is really actually going to really control the weather back down the Midwest. But you'll notice dew points do go up a little bit more from the southern plains back into areas like Montana, and that could at least spawn some thunderstorm activity later this week, but severe weather right now is not expected. And even going into the weekend, you'll notice again that high pressure system comes out of Canada, and it's going to be a very large high pressure system. It'll keep a lot of areas in the Midwest dry. We could see the potential for record-breaking high temperatures as well back up into that region. And even in the Northeast, much drier conditions are expected there. Going into the weekend and into early next week, that is when severe weather and potentially significant severe weather could return to the Great Plains. You'll notice a lot more humidity starting to return with very strong southerly winds. Might get another organized trough, maybe negatively tilted. That would increase the threat for severe weather overall. So on the future radar, again, high pressure at the surface will be dominating a large chunk of the United States. That includes the Great Plains and as well as the Midwest throughout the rest of this weekend and even into early next week. Only rain that we'll see anywhere in the Great Plains will just be some isolated storm activity. Most of it will originate from areas like Kansas back through Texas. Once we go into Wednesday into Thursday, showers and storms continue, but look down to the southeast. This is closer to Florida. There's actually a low chance for a tropical system to develop later this week. Now, this will not be anything too significant. It would probably, if anything, just be like a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm at worst, but it would probably not bring any significant impacts. You'll notice going closer to Friday into Saturday, two different areas to watch, one of which will be that very high or very dominant strong high pressure system back into the Midwest. That'll keep areas dry high over there, and this will actually direct where this tropical system will go by around Friday into Saturday. And this again could bring some heavy rainfall, so maybe some flooding rains near the East Coast, and in addition to that, maybe some higher wind gusts. As we go into Saturday as well as into Sunday, that moves off to the north and east. Obviously, where that tropical system could go is a big question mark, but we'll keep you posted there, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And eventually going to next week, things do become fairly uncertain by then. Now, I have been mentioning the potential for heat waves in the United States, especially back up into the Midwest, and that's really going to begin as we go into next week once that high pressure system starts to dominate in the Midwest. So this is going into tomorrow. High temperatures across areas in the northern plains and the Midwest will be above average. Meanwhile, in the southern plains and anywhere near the Gulf Coast, they'll actually be a little bit below average in some areas. But going throughout the week, that is when temperatures stay fairly regular for most of the country. But the Midwest is the one area that does stand out to me. That is where we could see temperatures 15 degrees above average in some spots. We might even see some record-breaking highs as we get closer to Friday or Saturday. Notice maybe some colder air as well back over on the East Coast that might be associated with that little tropical system. And then once we go into next week, warm air does continue, especially across areas in the northern plains and the Midwest. That is again where we might see some record-breaking highs this week. Now, I mentioned the tropical system. I do want to go back to that for just a moment. We'll see showers and storms throughout the week across areas in the southeast. That does include Florida. I wouldn't really expect a whole lot of severe weather out of any of this, but once we get closer to Thursday into Friday, that is when a tropical system could develop. This, again, is not going to be a hurricane. I know a lot of people are probably going to see a lot of things that are be indicating, tropical systems, maybe some hype there on the internet, but we're not really looking at anything too crazy out of this. If anything, for anywhere along the East Coast, from anywhere from the Carolinas or Virginia back through Florida, it's mostly just going to be rain with maybe some very minimal storm surge, but I would even really expect that at this point. And then once we go into next week, that does race off to the north and east towards areas back up into the northeast. For the wind gusts, this is the European model indicating how high the winds might get out of this system, and overall they will not be very high. You'll notice the wind gusts only around 50 miles per hour, so again, if there were to be a tropical storm here, it would be very weak overall, maybe around 40 to 45 miles per hour, if anything like that, and that would probably be closer to around Friday or so going into later this week. Now, with huge high pressure systems does come much drier conditions, and this is the forecast from the Weather Prediction Center for the next 3 days, and you'll notice again that low pressure system I mentioned at the very beginning of this forecast will bring more rain to areas like the East Coast and as well as back through Florida and into the Northeast, and that is all that they're going to see for the next 3 to 5 days. And you'll notice maybe a little bit of shower and storm activity down in the southern and central plains, but overall nothing too crazy. But look at the 7-day forecast from the Weather Prediction Center. We are really going to see a huge hole in the Midwest for any sort of rain or severe weather. So if you're anywhere in Wisconsin, Michigan, or Illinois or Indiana, you should be fine. You're probably not going to see any severe weather, but obviously no rain either. That could start to increase a little bit of that drought potential. Back through areas in the Great Plains, there will be some rain, but it will not be anything too crazy. And again, look at the East Coast. There's not going to be a whole lot of rain. The only rain that might come later this week would be from that tropical system that could end up developing. And just off the coast, you'll notice, look at all that rainfall. That's upwards of 6 to 10 inches of rain just off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. So some significant rainfall off the coast, but as of right now, does not seem to be any flooding potential along the coast at this time. For the severe weather over the next several days as well, nothing too concerning. For today, there's just very low risks of severe weather, a couple back up in the northwest United States, and also one just along the Gulf Coast back through Georgia. But notice going into tomorrow, there's actually a slight risk of severe weather in a very uncommon area that we usually don't see severe weather much of during this time of the year. This happens more during the summer, back up into the northwest United States. That's for mainly damaging winds and maybe some hail. But otherwise, things do look nice across the United States for the rest of this week. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting and Alden's Repair.